Hello students, welcome to this second lecture of English. Dear students, in last video lecture we studied some basic information about the pros and astrologers day. In today's lecture we are going to learn the actual story. So let's start the actual story, an astrologer's day. This story has divided into the four parts. So first of all I read the first part, then I'll explain. First part started from the first line. An astrologer's day. Punctually at midday he opened. Till next page, page number 3. He carried home at the end of the day. This is the first part of the story, means first passage. In board exam, passage wise question answer will be asked, so that's why each and every lesson has divided into the specific passage. For your kind information, you just mark the passage. I repeat once again. First passage started from punctually at midday till page number 3. He carried home at the end of the day. So first I read the whole passage, then I'll explain. Be careful, pay attention on the screen. If you have a textbook, please look at the textbook. An astrologer's day, first passage. Punctually at midday, he opened his bag and spread out his professional equipment, which consists of a dozen cowrie shells, a square piece of cloth with obscure mystic charts on it, a notebook and a bundle of Palmyra writing. His forehead was resplendent with sacred ash and vermilion, and his eyes sparkled with an sharp abnormal gleam, which was really an outcome of a continual searching looks for customers, but which his simple clients took to be a prophetic light and felt comfort. The power of his eyes was considerably enhanced by their position placed as they were between the painted forehead and the dark whiskers which streamed down his cheeks. Even a half-wit's eye would sparkle in such a setting. To crown the effect, he would a saffron-colored turban around his head. This color scheme never failed. People were attracted to him as bees are attracted to cosmos or dahlia stalks. He sat under the broad of boughs of spreading tamarind tree, which flank a path running through the town hall park. It was a remarkable place in many ways. A surging crowds was always moving up and down this narrow road from morning till night. A variety of trades and occupation was represented all along its way. Medicine seller, sellers of stolen hardware and junk, magician, and above all an auctionaries of cheap cloth who created enough din all day to attract the whole town. Next to him, in vociferousness, came a vendor of fried groundnut who gave his ware a fancy name each day, calling it Bombay ice cream one day, and on the next Delhi almond, and on the third Raja's delicacy, and so on and so forth, and people flocked to him. A considerable portion of this crowded elite before the astrologers too. The astrologers translated his business by the light of a flare which crackled and smoked up above the groundnut heap nearby. Half the enchantment of the place was due to the fact that it did not have the benefit of municipal lighting. The place was lit up by shop lights. One or two had hissing gas lights. Some had neck floors stuck on poles. Some were lit up by old cycle lamps. And one or two, like the astrologers, managed without lights of their own. It was a bewildering crisscross of light rays and moving shadows. This suited the astrologers very well, for the simple reasons that he had not in the least intent to be an astrologer when he began life, and he knew more of what was going to happen to others than he knew what was going to happen to himself in next minute. He was as much a stranger to the star as were his innocent customer. Yet he said things which pleased and astonished everyone. That was more a matter to study, practice, and shred. Guessworks all the same. It was as much an honest man's labor as any other, and he deserved the wages he carried home at the end of the day. Now let's see. The story begins with the astrologer's daily routine. At midday, the astrologers lay out his equipment and readies for the day. He has brought a dozen of cowrie shells, mystical looking but unreadable charts, parchments, and other accoutrements. His forehead is painted with sacred ash. He wears a saffron color. You know, the saffron color is an attractive color to as a Baba, as a Brahman, as a Sadhu, or as a Jyotishi. So that's why he used the saffron color. An astrologer's grab, in a combination with his keen eyes and a long beard, give him an enigmatic and comforting appearance to potential customers. He seems prophetic and wise thought. Even a half-wit eyes would sparkle in such a setting. Narayan vividly described the way in which the astrologer's appearance and equipment lent him a quasi supernatural presence, although the author leaves no room for doubt that the astrologer is indeed a fraud. The description of him is so compelling that it is easy to see how people would be fooled into regarding him as more than a mere man. The astrologer sit beneath a large termine tree near the road that leads through the town hall park. Around him, a marketplace with similarly fraudulent characters, including an auctioneer of cheap cloth and a man who sells the same fried food every day, but each day gives it his luxurious name, such as Bombay ice cream. The lights in the marketplace flickers and dance from dozens of sources, creating an enchanted feeling, a feeling bolstered by the fact that the marketplace lacks the benefit of municipal lighting. All the vendors are in the practice of overselling their own value. Both the cloth vendor and the food seller create the illusion of luxury, while the astrologers creates the illusion of wisdom and power. Catering to a poor demographic, each vendor exploits desired for the trapping of a more privileged life. Note the contrast of the astrologers representing ancient tradition with the town hall park representing modern administrations. The astrologers preferred the indirect lighting since he never aspired to be an astrologer at all, nor has he any business being one. He does not know any more about the stars than any customers who may come to him. Rather, he has the store of general platitudes and practices here for the guessing at people problems. Since they are very often all the same, he tells people the things they want to hear. Even so, the author surprisingly interjects his labor is an honest as author as his wages were earned. Look at the second passage. Second passage started from he had left his village without any previous thought or plan till page number 4, page number 5. Drying up, there is a woman. Till this second part is started. So I read the second part, then I'll explain. He had left his village without any previous thought or plan. If he had continued there, he would be carried on the work of his forefather, namely tilling the land, living, marrying, the reaping in his cornfield and the ancestors' home. Actually, he came from the farmer's family, so that's why all about the farmers related work he had to do if he did not left his village. But that was not to be. He had to leave home without telling anyone, and he could not rest till he left it behind a couple of 100 miles. To a villager it is a great deal, as if an ocean flowed between. He had a working analysis of mankind's trouble, marriage, money, and the tangles of human ties. Long practice had sharpened his perceptions. Within 5 minutes he understood what was wrong. He charged 3 rupees per question, never opened his mouth till the other had spoken for at least 10 minutes, which provided him enough stuff for a dozen of answer and advice. When he told the person before him, gazing at his palm, in many ways you are not getting the fullest result for your efforts. 9 of 10 were disposed to agree with him, or he questioned, is there any woman in your family, maybe even a distant relative, who is not well disposed towards you? Or he gave an analysis of characters. Most of your troubles are due to your nature. How can you be otherwise with Saturn where he is? You have an impetuous nature and rough exteriors. This entered him to their heart immediately, for even the mildest of us loves to think that he has a forbidding existence. The nuts vendor blew out his flare and rose to go home. This was a signal for the astrologers to bundle up too, since he left him the darkness except for a little shaft of the green light which stayed in from somewhere he touched the ground before him. He picked up the cowrie shells and paraphernalia and was putting them back into his bag, and the green shaft of light was blotted out. He looked up and saw a man standing before him. He sensed a possible client and said, "You look so careworn. It will do you good to sit down for a while and chat with me." The other grumbled some reply vaguely. The astrologers praised his invitation, whereupon the other thrust his palm under his nose, saying, "You call yourself as an astrologer?" The astrologer felt challenged and said, lightening the other palms towards the green shaft of light, "Yours is a nature." "Oh, stop that." And other said, "Tell me something worldwide or friend felt pipe. I change only 3 pieces per question. And what you get ought to be good enough for your money." As this, the other withdrew his arm, took out an anna and flung it out to him, saying, "I have some questions to ask. If I prove you are bluffing, you must return the anna. Anna means rupees to me with nearest. If you find my answer satisfactory, will you give me 5 rupees? No. Or will you give me the 8 annas? All right. Provide you give me twice as much, you are wrong," said the stranger. The pact was accepted after the little further agreement. The astrologer sent a prayer to heaven as the other lit a cheroot. The astrologers caught a glimpse of his face by the matchlight. There was a pause, a car's hoot on the road. Jutka drives swore at their horses, and a babble of the crowd agitated the semi-darkness of the park. The other sat down, sucking his cheroot, puffing out. Sat this ruthlessly. The astrologer felt very uncomfortably. "Here, take your Anna back. I am not used to such challenge. It is late for me today." He made preparation, a bundle up. The other held his wrist and said, "You can't get out it now. You dragged me in while I was passing." The astrologer seized in the grip, and his voice shook and became faint. "Leave me today. I will speak to you tomorrow." The other thrust his palm in his face and said, "Challenge is challenge. Go on." The astrologer proceeded with his thought, drawing, "There is a woman." This is the second passage. Now, according to this second passage, the astrologers prefers to indirect arguably poor lighting in twofold. In both enchants the mysticisms and helps conceals the fact that he is not actually a true astrologer at all. Despite this, the author sympathizes with him, noting the ways in which he acts as a therapist, listening to the problems of his customer and offering advice that many soothe them for a time. Years before, the astrologer has to leave his home suddenly without telling anyone and without preparation. He stayed, he would have been a farmer like forefathers, working, marrying, dying. But it has not to be. Instead, he had to flee several hundred miles, an immense distance for villagers, and take up a new life. Though it is later revealed that the astrologers fled after attempting murder for the foreshadows of it. It dismissive, reflecting his own current feelings towards the situation. He seems to blame his departures on fate. Yet he left the only honest life he could have lived. The astrologers has form a working analysis of humanity problems, being as they all relate to marriage, money, or messy human affairs. When someone comes to him, he first listens for the 10 minutes before speaking, uh, by which point he has many things that could be said. He pass off as cosmological wisdom. Often his answers are vague but sufficiently satisfying to give comfort to people. Otherwise, they are self-affirming to be listener, and as such leave them satisfied. He enters his customers to himself, but it careful to tie such praise a cosmological symbol such as the position of Saturn. Although the astrologer has no ancient wisdom, he does not seem to be it. The problem of mankind are the same as they have always been. Perhaps the astrologer's customer do not actually need an astrologer at all, but merely a listening ear and a soothing voice to calm their nerves. But recognizing the desire for the illusion of control and significance, the astrologers manipulates his customers to their mutual benefit. At the day's end, the nuts vendor next to the astrologers blows out his flare and goes home, meaning it is time for the astrologers to go home as well. There is no more light available to him, save for the small shaft of green light and straight to the ground in front of him. With the fading of the light, the astrologers had successfully upheld his ruse for another day. Yet under the cover of darkness, he is perhaps now bolder than he ought to be. As the astrologer is packing his grab and equipment, the stranger bolts out the green light. The astrologer summons him to sit down, hoping to make money of him. The stranger resists, but astrologer presses until finally the stranger steps to him and aggressively offers a challenge. Ironically, it is the astrologer's greed which brings him to the encounter that almost cost him both his false identity and his life. That the stranger blows out the light is significant, given that light throughout the story has signified the illusion of cosmic wisdom. The blocking of the light aligns with the stranger's skepticisms. The stranger offers a large sum of the clinical wagers that the astrologers cannot tell him anything worldwide. They haggle over the wager, eventually raising the price and the stakes, an immediate contrast to everyone else in the story. The stranger is instantly skeptical of the astrologer's authenticity, and rightly so. Again, the astrologer's greed intervenes as he keeps haggling for greater sums. So, this is the second passage of the story. Let's see the more information in third passage. Thank you.